business, we can go ahead and call the Conservation of Biological Resources Subcommittee of July 8th to order at 7:02. And let's join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all. All right. So let's have a roll call.
Okay, Chairman Jeff Duncan.
Here.
Vice Chair Stephanie Youngblood.
Here.
I do not see Tim yet. Sylvie Fournier.
Here.
And not Lorraine yet. Jean Wilson.
Here.
Here.
Jesse Lunsford.
Yes, ma'am.
And Brian Baker.
Where?
Present.
That's right down here.
Okay. So now's the time for committee comment for items not on the agenda. Anyone like to make a comment on any items not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, do we have any public comment for items not on the agenda?
Chairman Duncan, we have one public member here at the depot, but not stepping up to the podium to speak, so we're clear.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I need a motion for the adoption of the agenda.
I move.
I'll second. It was Jean.
Okay. All right, Jeff Duncan.
Aye.
Stephanie Youngblood.
Aye.
Sylvie Fournier.
Aye.
Jean Wilson.
Aye.
And Jesse Lunsford.
Yes.
Okay, now it's time for public comment on the consent agenda. The consent agenda are the minutes of June 10th, 2021. So any public comment? Greg? Anything?
Hearing none.
Okay. Seeing none, we'll have a motion for the consent agenda.
I so move.
Second.
Okay.
Okay, Jeff Duncan.
Aye.
Stephanie Youngblood.
Aye.
Sylvie Fournier.
Aye.
Jean Wilson.
Aye.
And Jesse Lunsford.
Aye.
Okay, now we get down to the business of the committee matters. So I'll turn it over. Is it David?
Yes, David Bice is our technical staff on the biological conservation of resources element. So welcome everybody and take it away, David.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good evening, committee members. Let me pull the agenda.
Is that okay?
Technical difficulties here. Can you see the file?
Not
Okay.
yet, David.
Can you see it now?
What we have is a black screen. There we go. What we're looking at is the element and not the PowerPoint, if that makes any difference to you.
Well, well, PowerPoint may not cooperate, but let me just give you a synopsis about what we're doing this evening. So last meeting, we stopped at going over the aquatic resource measures. So we're going to pick up tonight on the oak woodland discussion, which is the underlined text starting at objective NR-1.4. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So once we've gone through the policies and objectives and implementation measures for the oak woodland, and there's not that many, there's about a page and a half here. And then once we get through that and the committee is comfortable with that text, then there's a couple of text edits that we did based on comments that we received on the last committee meeting. So we'll go back through those and see if the committee is comfortable with those. And then that would be it for the edits in the biological resources section. So I'll just start with objective NR 1.4, which is to protect oak woodlands, heritage trees, and significant stands of native trees that occur within the town.
Excuse me, David, are you able to zoom to make the text a little bigger? You've
Yeah.
got the left margin thing on one side and then the comment stuff on the other. Yeah, thank you. Oh,
Ralph, I don't have a hand to raise here.
we can hear you, Jean.
Oh, okay. Are we ready for comment on that or not?
Let's see if David can make it. There we go. Thank you.
Is that better?
Bigger.
Yes,
that's better.
very much so. Thank you.
I'm looking at the statement about heritage trees on several of these here, and it either seems to conflict with or it's a conflation of what is in our zoning ordinance on the tree preservation ordinance, which distinguishes between heritage trees and protected trees. Heritage trees in the zoning ordinance are only those that are so designated by the council. We don't currently have any, but they could. So it's one of those, all heritage trees are protected trees, but not all protected trees are heritage trees. And I'm wondering what you were trying to get at here. It almost looks like what we would call all protected trees are here called heritage trees. So can you explain that a little better?
Well, and I think we, in the subsequent policies, we talk more about, we defer to the town's tree ordinance, which would protect heritage trees. We could reword this to say, or add in the verse trees protected by the town's tree ordinance.
Okay, because the zoning ordinance does have its own definitions, and it specifically says heritage trees are protected. The ones that are okay. Heritage tree means any tree identified by council resolution. Protected tree means any native oak tree with a trunk diameter, and it distinguishes 6 inches for certain ones and 4 inches for the blue oak, and et cetera, et cetera. But they're looked at differently, so it kind of sounds like here we're lumping them all together.
Which actually may be correct. This is a general plan, and the general plan drives the codes, not the other way around. So I'm concerned about putting it the trees town ordinance because the general plan and its objectives drives what is actually written in the code. So
In other words, we're rewriting the zoning ordinance if we're going to specify that all protected trees are heritage trees.
we didn't say that here though. It says to protect oak woodlands, heritage trees, and heritage trees are defined in the glossary is what you said, and significant other stand of native trees. So in this case, to protect is for the oak woodlands, it is for the heritage trees, and also, yeah, David, we can't say as in the town's tree ordinance because
That could
this
change.
has to drive the tree ordinance.
Okay.
In other words, what I'm trying to say is we want to protect more than what the town is calling heritage trees.
How about we simplify it and say to protect oak woodlands and other species of trees identified by the town council,
There you go.
or
Thank
other
you.
significant stands of native trees. Since I think the focus is on native trees, I think we can leave native trees in there.
Right.
But it's more than stands.
How about other significant native trees?
Does that imply species? Because we don't protect any other species. And went over that multiple times in the tree. You know, we could change that, but
So here with this pretty broad declaration of an objective, I think we can leave the specifics to the tree ordinance.
okay.
The concern with getting too specific here is that we limit ourselves down the line when it comes to implementation.
Thank you, Andreas.
So do we feel okay with that objective as it's currently worded?
Yes, I think so. It will also imply we might need to look at the next line down.
Right. Okay, so tearing off of that, policy NR 1.4.1, oak woodland, individual heritage trees and significant stands of heritage trees shall be preserved on site wherever feasible during newly proposed project design and construction consistent with the town's tree ordinance.
Could we just say protected instead of heritage? It would cover both groups of things.
So oak woodland and protected trees.
Yeah, and get out consistent with the tree ordinance. Again, we can't go backwards. The tree ordinance comes from the direction that we're giving here.
How's that sound?
Good.
Now, my next question has to do with defining project. I know we can't go back and forth, but the tree ordinance defines development projects and distinguishes it from municipal permitted projects, which are included from the development project. And this just says projects. So do we mean everything from things that need more than ministerial? Or do we include if somebody comes in and they want to do just some individual thing on their property? Are we including, is everything a project? Do we need to tell them what a project is, or that gets defined somewhere else?
Well, the question is, what do you want covered? That would be the question. project would typically be a project that requires a discretionary action on the part of the town. Non-discretionary action would generally not be considered a project.
Okay, so that's a typical, well-understood definition, I guess.
I think so.
Yes.
So we don't need to define it.
Although here there's probably approvals required anytime somebody wants to touch a protected tree. So they would by definition have a project on their hands as soon as they come in for that permit to affect the trees in contravention to this policy.
Carol is our expert on this tree ordinance thing. She's the one that handles all the processing on those. Okay.
So Jean, you're right that, we handle them a little bit different when they are individual property owners on lots that cannot be subdivided. They are still required to bring in a tree permit, but they are not charged any mitigation fees. And generally speaking, if they come in and branches are falling on their house, that kind of stuff, it's approved over the counter.
Right.
But everybody who removes any oak tree is required to turn in a tree permit. It's our way of keeping track of what's going on, and it's in their file. It kind of prevents somebody from bypassing a bunch of stuff by coming in once a month and saying, I want to cut a tree today. I want to cut a tree today. It kind of gets us to take a look at what's going on and why is it going on.
Yeah. Okay.
But here's a question of the committee on 141 is to end the sentence with feasible. And real simply, oak, woodland, and protected trees shall be preserved on site whenever feasible. It doesn't say if it's a project. It's the town has a policy that whenever feasible, they'll be preserved on site. So that, or do you want to limit it only to projects? And that's kind of a question of the committee of how broad you want to make that.
Well, it kind of conflicts, doesn't it, with the way we handle, pretty much people can get, unless they're abusing it, but if their property is not subdividable, there's a lot of flexibility that I don't know if this works with, maybe conflicts with it.
Yeah, because we do offer flexibility. If somebody wants a pool, then of course they can cut down a tree for these things. It's things that we watch for on lots that are residential lots that are not subdividable. It's anything commercial or anything that can be subdivided that we become very, very cautious about what they're doing. And they have to show plans, they have to pay mitigation and that kind of stuff.
So maybe the fact that we use the word project and that's understood pretty much as something needing more than ministerial, then that probably would cover that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be correct. So yeah. That narrows that policy down just slightly.
Okay.
Okay, so Andy, do we need to move the whenever feasible, or do we want to talk about that?
I think you need to whenever feasible because every project is different, and I think that has to be kind of up to the project review at the time that that's going on.
Okay. So do we feel good about that policy then?
I like it. I don't, how's everyone else feel about that? 1.4, 1.1.
I'd like to leave that in because it tells them that we are looking to you to preserve these trees if you can make it work with your project, not just, oh, give us a project and we'll let you do whatever you want.
If Jean's good, I'm good.
Okay, so tearing off of that are the implementation measures. Implementation measure 1.4.1.1. Project proponents shall show during project review that project design has avoided oak woodland and protected trees to the greatest extent feasible.
Is it too strong? I don't know. I mean, you know, but I want some teeth in it.
I think extent feasible, Gene, is strong, but it still gives discretion to make some choices about the specific project.
Okay.
And going back to your other policy where it says whenever feasible, this tightens it up a bit to be the greatest extent feasible. Or yeah, so it tightens it up a bit from the policy.
Okay, we good on that?
Looks good.
Okay, measure 1.4.1.2, project design measures shall include appropriate tree protection measures during construction for protected trees to be preserved on site.
That's pretty straightforward, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there was some back and forth about whether or not to put some wording in about by a certified arborist, but in my mind, that's maybe a little bit too restrictive in that a lot of times tree protection measures can be designed that are very adequate by project proponents that don't necessarily come directly from an arborist.
And I think if the town wants to do that, Dave, that could go into the ordinance level, not a implementation measure level. But you're right.
Okay, are we okay with that one?
And we
Okay.
do
Measure
have in
1
our
point-
ordinance, we have a lot of specific things on that protection.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that one.
Our ordinance does have a lot of specifics on the kind of protection, so
Correct.
that's where it belongs, I think.
Okay.
This is fine the way it is.
Okay, measure 1.4.1.3, healthy heritage trees and protected trees subject, well, I think we should take this out, right? We're not talking-
Yeah. Sorry, Dave.
No,
Otherwise, we get a roundabout going.
right. So healthy heritage trees and protected trees. Well, we're not talking about heritage trees either, right? So should
I
be
just say,
healthy
protected.
protected trees.
yeah.
Protected
Which-
trees shall only be removed or significantly trimmed when determined to be necessary because of safety concerns, conflicts with utility lines or other infrastructure, the need for thinning to maintain a healthy stand of trees, to implement required fire reduction, or where there is no feasible alternative to removal.
So does that conflict with the way we actually do things, or?
What I've seen, Carol, what do you think? Because what I've seen, this pretty much is how the town is dealing with it right now.
Well, you know, what I question on that is there are healthy trees that are removed for the purposes of development. If somebody's building a house, and that's the area of the parcel that is the best or within the building envelope.
That last few words covers that, where there is no feasible alternative to removal.
Yeah, that would be, you know, as long as we, you know, I agree with Jean in the fact that we do issue tree removal for healthy trees. It's sometimes it's the only way that somebody can build a house. It's you know, it's the only way that something can be done. So as long as that word there.
Yeah, I think that's covered by the very end of this implementation
Perfect.
measure.
Perfect.
We want it so that Carol can work with it, that's all.
Exactly.
And if you're removing a tree to add on to your house or add an accessory dwelling unit, it's a healthy tree, then you're tagged with a tree removal permit. And do you pay mitigation fees?
That would be covered under the ordinance. That would not
Right,
be covered by this
exactly.
measure.
Okay.
Okay, we feel okay on that one?
Oh, yeah, the tree ordinance again, Dave.
Yeah.
Yes.
Change this to protected trees. Okay, so measure 1.4.1.4, when protected trees are removed by a newly proposed project, they shall be replaced in sufficient numbers to maintain the trees, the town's overall tree canopy.
Okay.
Any comments or concerns about that?
I had been looking for what happened to the tree canopy part that was deleted, so I guess this is where it went.
Yeah, and this text is, again, very similar to what was in the current version of the general plan. It's just put in this implementation measure hierarchy, basically.
Was the one in the general plan specific to a development project, or was it a general goal of the town to maintain?
You see below this strikeout, the implementation measure 1.3.1.2 is the old wording. And it doesn't tie it necessarily to development in the old wording.
Okay, well, as long as we have something in about maintaining the canopy.
Do we have concerns about the newly proposed project part? Do we want to edit that in any way?
We need newly proposed.
Actually, you don't need that. I don't think when protected trees are removed, they shall be replaced by a sufficient number. And that is covered exactly when and how in the tree ordinance.
Yeah.
But since we're not imposing that on basically individual homeowners, we might want to leave project in, because that helps define who has to do the replacement. In other words, if you're adding on, you're putting in your ADU, you're building a pool, then you don't have to do those things. So maybe we should leave it, whatever it said about project, and just leave that newly proposed.
Yeah, okay.
But we probably don't need newly proposed, do we?
We could just say by a proposed project. Yeah.
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 Okay. Any other comments on that one? Okay, so that's the end of the goals, ordinances, implementation measures. The things down here for the rest of the bio section, you'll see the comment here are, these are basically replaced by what we've already gone over. So these are all old wording, basically from the current general plan. You see the stream corridor protection, open space, surface water drainage facilities. So these are all encompassed by what we've gone over already, regulated aquatic resources. And then we get down to air quality. So that's why all this is in strikeout mode. It's just been reworded and incorporated into what you've gone over already, basically.
I did
So-
go over, all the deletions to see what we were moving or redoing. One question I had about the overall canopy is, we've said as a goal, well, implementation, I guess, but part of the goal on preserving trees, we've left it basically as we're only holding, I don't want to say holding responsible, but I think the town also, besides telling developers, you need to promote our canopy, maintain the canopy. I guess the town also wants as a whole to maintain the canopy. Now, part of that is encouraging people individually to not take down trees unnecessarily, but there also probably maybe there's an educational kind of element or something. Are we missing out by not setting a goal beyond protecting oak woodlands? I mean, we entered what's called green print, and we gave the SACOG a figure, and actually I think we've either met or exceeded our goal on that, but I think we want, overall, do we want to have something more than just protect the oak woodlands? Maybe not, but trees are so valuable.
Well, in this case, your objective is oak woodlands and other significant native trees, and definitely you want native trees. So I think the objective covers that. David, maybe there needs to be a policy that the town encourages the preservation of the native trees and the canopy. Maybe there needs to be another policy, as Jean said, kind of just focused on not development projects, but just people within the community.
Is there any plan to increase the canopy or actively plant more street trees?
Yeah, I was thinking, see, then I'm thinking through, well, this is under the natural resources, and if we're talking about the overall canopy, that's going to include landscape trees, which are part of our overall tree canopy. So maybe that doesn't really belong here. If we're looking at the overall canopy, it's just in general, it's something that we want to encourage, and it's something that I looked at, for instance, with the village and how few trees they were able to put in when they had the alley loaded, because there was really no way to include even our normal number of trees, and island effect and things like that. It's kind of a whole other issue. Maybe that belongs in one of the other elements or someplace else.
I think, though, that something here to talk about the preservation of your native trees and its canopy is important for the whole community. And looking at the aerial photographs where your canopy is today, there are some gaps that have the native canopy has been removed, and I think there's opportunities to replace that canopy. And I think the town should encourage that. Replacing lost canopy, something to that effect. And that, David, that does, and that doesn't just speak to any project. That's just an overall goal, which I think one of the things that the town has done is a tree study. We're looking at where we can plant trees, because we have a number of trees from projects that still need to be planted in the town. And I think this would be helpful as we look at ordinances or implementation measures to plant more trees in the town.
Yeah, I think that's helpful, though, what you just did there, David. I think that looks good. Don't you, Jean?
I think so.
I'm still curious as to why we wouldn't want to set any kind of goal to increase the tree canopy if there are indeed gaps. It's not just preservation and replacement, but increasing, especially as the climate gets so hot.
It does say replacement of lost tree canopy, but let me think here.
Maybe we don't need the word lost.
Yeah, but it goes to what Lorraine was just saying is we want to increase the tree canopy and there's opportunities where we've lost it. But maybe we just change it to encourage preservation and expansion.
I
like-
But preservation,
Yes.
replacement, and enhancement of the tree canopy.
Okay, thank you, Andrea.
I like expansion.
Expansion is more than enhance. I think
Yeah.
it says it better than enhancement. Enhancement kind of sounds like keep what you have, but make it look better.
Yeah.
Enhancement, yeah.
Or, you know, functionally better or something.
Trim those trees.
And for
Yeah.
anybody that didn't know, the Homewood number of trees,
Mhm.
that has been now settled with the town for a dollar amount. So that is no longer, that number no longer on the books.
So there's some money that the town, if we can find a place to plant the trees, we'll be able to plant trees.
Right. But, or whatever else we are going to do with that.
Right. Right.
That's reasonable and fits the bill. But it's no longer a certain number of trees to that account. We took the money. They were selling the property, so I asked what happened to the tree mitigation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
I like this.
Feel okay on
The
that one?
canopy part.
Okay, so that's it as far as new policy and implementation and objective wording. There were a couple of edits that we did at the beginning that I'd like to go over that we had comments on from the last committee meeting that are highlighted in green here. So I'll go at the top. So in the introduction, we had some comments about, protecting natural resources in general, not necessarily just sensitive or special status plants and wildlife. So this sentence just added in the phrase, I think we had made it more general in our last meeting. So it just protects habitat for plant and wildlife species. And then we added in, including those that are rare and unique to the region. Are we okay with that?
Looks good to me. Anyone else?
I think
Good
it's
also.
good.
Sounds
Okay, and then I think we talked about this, but we have some objectives and policies that are specific to groundwater and surface water quality, but we didn't really have a goal that covered that exclusively. The NR1 touches on that, because if you're protecting biological communities, you're at least in some cases also protecting water quality. But I added in this measure NR2. The goal states to protect groundwater and surface water quality of streams and other aquatic resources within the town, because it dovetails a little bit with some of the objectives, policies, and implementation measures we talked about in the last meeting.
David, should protect and enhance be in there? And I can't recall you probably know the objectives and implementations better, but more than just protect, but where possible, enhance.
Okay, so that's a good suggestion. Any other edits or concerns about that?
One concern as far as the vocabulary that we use stream aquatic resources, we use creek aquatic resources, we use stream corridor, and we use creek corridor all in these pages. And I'm just wondering, is there an issue or problem when it comes to defining one versus the other?
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit, and maybe we need to go through and use the sort of all-encompassing term of stream. We talked about putting the definition of a stream in the glossary, which would, I think, basically essentially would be blue line features on the quadrangle, or as designated by the town, basically.
That's fine. I just saw those 4 different terms used over the last few over the next few pages, and I just wondered, to me it was confusing myself as far as were we referring back to streams, we're referring back to creeks, we're referring back to corridors. It's a little bit confusing.
Yeah, I'll make a note to go through when we're doing the glossary term and make sure we're consistent with the references about streams and creeks. It'll probably all defer to streams, basically. And then the stream would be defined in the glossary.
And could it include, say that includes X, Y, and Z if you needed to?
I have a comment on, you're making the statement for the policy for protecting and enhancing groundwater, et cetera. Do you have a mechanism for protection? There's a statement there and it just begs, like, how are you going to protect it? For example, if somebody comes in, people want to put, a lot of people are moving into the area and maybe they want to put in wells. Do you have a way to approve a well permit to know that there's enough water in the ground that they can do that?
This policy only deals with the water quality. And so there are procedures of, and I think the town already has ordinances that keep construction away from the streams, you set back the streams without disturbance. And definitely Fish and Wildlife Environmental Protection Agency, if you're working in a stream, they have procedures in place to protect the water quality. This policy or this goal doesn't talk about the amount, it just talks about the quality.
I don't know if that's probably not the place to address that. But to me, with water shortages going on right now, I think it also does, tapping into water, even PCWA water during a water crisis is another issue. And it may not really tie directly into this, but there's something to think about.
Public facilities cover conservation.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask one more question about the protection and enhancement of groundwater? Does that mean other ordinances about runoff, either of pesticides, agricultural products, oil? Is that cared for someplace else? Because that's usually one of the chief things that affects the water quality of streams and sources.
This gives the ability to have the ordinances to do exactly that, Maureen.
Okay. Yeah. And
we do talk about, I think we went over a couple of policies and implementation measures last meeting that, and we made an edit to one of those, so we can see it again tonight. But there are some measures that, through setbacks that Andy mentioned and some other things that would help protect the water quality of those areas.
Much of the town actually is not having there probably are some areas that have groundwater, but a lot of it here is not actual what people think of it as an underground reservoir of groundwater. A lot of it we're tapping into streams down in the granite. You can find the cracks that have some water. So it's not the usual groundwater, and you don't have seepage into it the same way as you would, say, in the Central Valley, where you've got soils that will absorb all the way down to the aquifer. But we may have some groundwater areas here. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'd have to defer to a hydrologist about the extent of the groundwater resources in the town.
But it's a good idea to put it in here.
That looks
Okay.
good. So what is the prepared highlighted for?
That was just added in. I think that was a comment that maybe that sentence and phrase needed to be
I see.
added in, so it was
Hey,
obvious.
David, we have the term streams in goal number 2, and surface water is a stream. So
I think we could cover everything we're hoping to achieve by just saying to protect and enhance groundwater and surface water within the town. Since water is either groundwater or surface water, that covers all of it.
yeah. Thank you, Andreas.
Mhm. It just occurred to me thinking back on how broadly we should define this stuff and what definition we could look to. And I remembered that kind of fundamental principle that stuff is either groundwater or surface water, and
What are you
falls
going
into one of those two pots.
You going through some litigation, thinking how you'll protect the town?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so to get back to the other question about prepared, it's just that phrasing, I think we decided sounded better. So the town shall require, as part of the environmental review process, a biotic resources evaluation prepared by a qualified biologist instead of by a qualified biologist.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. But now I have to go back to protect and enhance groundwater, surface water, because we were talking about the definition of a stream or creek and the interchangeable use. Do we have to go to the glossary and have a definition of what surface water is? Because
Yes. Yeah.
okay. Very good.
Okay, I will make a note that we need to define.
We may have one in there already, David, but yeah, make a note to look. That glossary is turned into an unwieldy large document.
A book of its own.
Yes.
Is there going to be a definition of project so that people aren't confused? I mean, now that you've explained, I understand why it's okay to put it in here unqualified, but will that?
We can, I thought there was a definition in glossary, Gene. Obviously,
maybe
you haven't got all the way
Maybe there
through it.
is. I haven't studied the glossary that far.
But I'll make a note
Okay.
that we define project.
Okay, it may be there already.
Yeah, I think it's 60 pages now, so I'm trying. There's a lot.
Okay, so I'm skipping over the parts that are no longer underlined that we went through last time. So the comment on this part for implementation measure NR 1.2.1.3 was to make the wording similar to the implementation measure below instead of how it was previously worded. So now it's worded, proposed structures and grading shall be set back a minimum of 100 feet from the outermost extent of riparian vegetation or outside of the 100-year floodplain, whichever is greatest.
Very good.
At the very end of that, we talk about stream resources. Is there a way to include trails and bike paths? Well, if they go with lesser setbacks, we still have room for the trails and bike paths?
That second part of the implementation measure, it just means you're going to have to study and make sure that, you know, you're not impacting anything, Jesse.
Yeah, there are,
This basically, Jesse says at the beginning that this is for structures and grading.
Well, grading, a bike trail would be
yeah,
grading, yeah.
Well, that's true.
trail could have grading involved with it, definitely.
Because again, then we can back up to 121, and it talks about the town shall encourage projects to avoid and minimize direct and indirect impacts to streams and associated replicant habitats to the maximum extent feasible. Shouldn't that be including the setbacks? Shouldn't they be part of that protection?
Since the setbacks are listed already as an implementation measure, basically the development standard would cover that. So I think that implementation measure should be okay.
Okay, I just curious because we're talking about a 100-foot or a 50-foot setback if it's a dry creek bed. And I want to make sure of that 100-foot setback that there is nothing that as far as grading or leveling would take from that 100-foot setback, even though it has nothing to do with the stream itself. Does that make sense?
Basically, any disturbance next to a stream has potential impacts on the habitat and the water quality. So I guess it doesn't make sense. I'm trying to figure out what you're trying to get at here.
Well, we've got 100 feet from the stream bed itself. That's
Correct.
part of the setbacks. What I don't want is trees taken out, grading taking place in that 100 feet of setback. That may have nothing to do with the stream itself. It won't pollute it. It won't put grade into it. But I'd like to keep that 100-foot as natural as possible. If
That's what this language does.
Yeah,
This
that
language
does.
creates that 100-foot buffer.
Perfect. That's all I was
Okay.
concerned with. If it needed an additional explanation on setbacks.
And it's not just the waterway, it's any vegetation that is next to that waterway that also qualifies as riparian vegetation. So it could potentially be further than 100 feet from the edge of the water body. Since here we've tied it to vegetation rather than surface water.
Thank you.
Okay, so we went over that implementation measure. Skip down again. So in implementation measure NR 1.2.1.9, we had a discussion about, making sure that restoration work happens where the restoration will benefit the town or resources that enter the town to the greatest extent feasible. So sort of the third one down in the order of desirability for regulating encroachment into a creek corridor would be restore another section of creek in kind, meaning the same type of creek as far as order, and again, we probably will change this to stream so it's not confusing, but actually I'll do it now while I'm thinking about it. This one. Where the restoration will provide benefit to streams within the town of Loomis. So this doesn't necessarily require the restoration work to happen within the town limits, but it would probably require it to happen either in or upstream of stream resources where you would have benefits to the water quality or other features within the town itself.
I like that for including the upstream as well possibility.
Okay, are we okay with that wording?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then in this implementation measure 1.2.1.11, we had some conversation about, these are this measure talks about restricting the dumping of agricultural waste or use of pesticides within stream corridors. And there was a excellent comment about needing to exempt mosquito abatement or vector control programs. So that's been added here. So to just paraphrase, activities are prohibited within the stream corridor setbacks, including dumping of agricultural waste, channelization or placement of dams, the use of pesticides, except where needed to safeguard public health, such as with mosquito abatement or other vector control programs. You okay with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Implementation measure 1.2.1.13. We had a conversation about, this is preservation of riparian and aquatic resources. We wanted to have it restricted to newly proposed public and private projects rather than having it be hit on existing property owners where they may have, projects they need to, or improvements they need to do on their private property. So as
The town is going to actually require this, that it be in some other ownership? Or what?
Well-
Because there are conservation easements that people put on their own land just to make sure it gets kept that way forever, but they're not owned or monitored, or maybe they're monitored, but they're not turned over to somebody else.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily require that. A fee title would transfer it over. Conservation easement is not giving over ownership of the property. It's a third party would hold a conservation easement on that parcel, but it would still be owned by the party in question. And again, it's got sort of the exemptor language about to the maximum extent feasible. It's really talking about, with this added on language about review of newly proposed public and private projects. And it wouldn't necessarily require the ownership to transfer.
Okay, so let me give an example from the only clustered development that we ever got to approve. And they had a little bit of wetlands, seasonal wetlands. And so those were put into a couple of separate parcels. And they investigated what it was going to cost to have somebody else basically take charge of it. And it was way too expensive, like $100,000 for each of the 7 lots, I think. And so basically the HOA was in charge of those lots. Would this preclude something like that? In other words, somebody else has to be in charge of it, some official group.
And HOA is an official group. I think HOAs actually are a viable option.
I think the last part about or other measures is appropriate would allow for an HOA to
Okay,
manage that.
okay.
Okay. 1.2.1.14. There is a concern about this has to do with periodic monitoring of open space areas to ensure the long-term protection. And then there was concern about what if this is on private property. So it was added, the town will obtain permission from private property owners prior to monitoring private parcels.
How are these biological areas getting designated?
Well, one of the ways is referring to the measure above, where you've got fee title to a third party or conservation easement or some sort of
Okay.
management by a land conservancy agency, or in your example, the HOA that's managing open space.
Okay.
Do we
That
think
makes
that
sense.
addresses the concern with the private property concerns?
Mhm.
Okay. And our 1.2.1.15, this has to do with encouraging volunteer labor from environmental groups to participate in open space maintenance. The conversation last meeting was a concern that maybe this would be too big of a onus on town staff to sort of manage and organize that. So the text was added: town staff will not be mandated to participate in or organize open space maintenance activities, with the exception of providing access permission as appropriate to land owned by the town. Does that sound okay?
What does that mean? They're going to write up something that says this group has permission to be on the town land? And is it one of those things where you sign up, you sign away that you're not going to sue the town if you get hurt or something? I mean, what are we talking about here? Other than that, we're not going to make town staff responsible for Creek Week with 500 volunteers.
Well, I think it's up to the town as far as like what they want to, exempt themselves from, as far as, personal liability or something like that. If they want to have cleanup participants sign some sort of waiver as part of participating in these maintenance activities. I'm not sure. I'll defer to others as to how
Letting
much.
them off the hook for organizing the whole thing.
No, this just, the town, yes, it takes the town off being mandated to organize the whole thing. What it says is, their activity will be to give permission for somebody to go on town property if appropriate, and how they do that, I think, is up to the town at that time. But I think that in this case, the concern was that this was not mandating the town to expend dollars they don't have.
Right. Okay.
Okay, that looks good. Looks all legal, right, Andres?
Yes, yes, it does.
Okay, we're in the aquatic resources protection part here. Implementation measure 1.3.1.3 has to do with mitigation of loss of aquatic resources. Again, there was a comment about mitigation and compensation being encouraged to be located within the town, or to benefit town resources, or to benefit resources that occur within the town. So that was just added as a preference when mitigation is considered for impacts to regulated aquatic resources.
Okay, everyone's all right with that? Looks good to me.
Okay, and that's it. We're back to Oak Woodland now.
All right.
So I will turn it back over to Mary Beth, unless anybody has any other questions or concerns.
Any other questions from the committee or our public, Greg Obranovich? Is there any other public on online? Mary
No,
Beth?
sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
Okay, so
Mary Beth, this is Jesse. Is it possible to pull up a Google map of San Jose?
Yes.
If you could do it for Cree Drive, CREE Drive.
I don't want to blow out our meeting. CREE?
CREE, right. Drive.
And you want the satellite view?
Please.
And I asked Tim, what is that shining above you?
Tim, are you on set?
Yeah, I'm on my way up to Mars with Elon.
So Cree Drive is right here.
Oh, we don't see your map.
They don't see the map.
Oh. Ah. So I have to correct myself because we're in a Zoom platform. I can't, I only have one screen, so I can't share. the other.
That's fine. I
Okay.
just want to point out that
Oh, Mr.
Oh, there we go.
Brewer.
if you could zoom in on Canonis Creek,
Oh,
Good.
well, I don't know how I did that.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. Canoas Creek.
yep, if you could scroll down just a little further.
There it is.
I'm sorry, you're too high in my picture. A little further down,
I have a little delay happening.
that's fine. I just want to point out to people that when you don't think you make a difference, you make a difference. This is San Jose. This is a creek that has no setbacks. They cemented in, and it's more for flood control than anything else now. And when you take a look at Secret Ravine and you see the setbacks in Rockland and Roseville, and you see it coming into Loomis, you see what a big difference you can make in what my generation is giving you, basically a cemented creek versus what you can actually drop forward for your next generation kids. Big difference. That's all I wanted to point out.
That's what happened to the creek that ends up at the village area when it went through Sunrise Loomis. It's all, the creek is still there, but it's all just cemented in. You don't even know it's there anymore.
Like I said, it's just sad that my generation didn't consider the setbacks, the wetlands. We went more for housing, and approving one or two more houses doesn't make a difference in the housing numbers. But eliminating one or two houses definitely makes a difference in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out. It's very nice. Very helpful.
And thank you to whoever pulled up
The
that
map.
Google map.
Yeah. Okay,
You're
so
welcome.
now it looks like we're at the end of our biological resources subcommittee. So the recommendation of this committee would be to send it on forward to the main conservation resources committee. Is that correct, Mary Beth?
That is correct. And I have some draft language for a motion that I will read. And if everybody is good, all we have to do is a motion and a second. This is a motion of the Biological Resources Committee to forward our recommendation for goals, policies, objectives, and implementation measures for our committee's assignment as modified by today's meeting. This committee recognizes that this completes our task at this time and that we have an opportunity to participate in the conservation of resources element review by the Planning Commission and Town Council of the draft 2020-2040 general plan update.
I so move, Jean.
Second, Lorraine.
Thank you both.
Okay, we have the motion and a second. Can we get a roll call vote?
Yes, Jeff Duncan,
Aye.
Stephanie Youngblood,
Aye.
Tim Undarko,
Aye.
Sylvie Fournier,
Aye.
Lorraine Theobald,
Aye.
Jean Wilson,
Aye.
and Jesse Lunsford.
Aye.
Okay. So that sounds like a win for this committee. And our next, the Conservation and Resources Committee is scheduled for what date, Mary Beth?
Well, at this point, the committee has just made a recommendation to town council to move forward to the planning commission. So the next meeting that would have been scheduled would be August 12th. But because you've concluded your assignment, we do not need to continue meetings.
Right,
No, the umbrella committee, Mary Beth, the conservation committee.
right.
Oh, conservation. I'm sorry, I misunderstood that.
So we're moving this, we're recommending this gets moved to the umbrella committee for their consideration for the entire conservation of resources. And then from there, it goes to planning commission, correct?
Correct.
And do we have a date for that umbrella committee, Conservation Resources?
Yes.
July the 28th.
It's 28th.
Yes, July 28th,
Very good.
7 o'clock.
Yes, July 28th, 7 o'clock. Very good. And I just want to tell everyone, thanks for your participation in this committee. I know sometimes it's very detailed and trying to understand some of the technical terms are tough, but I think we've done an excellent job with the staff's help and all the volunteers. So I really do appreciate it. And hopefully some of you may be on that Conservation Resource Committee. If not, tune in. If you choose to, I don't know, or just watch it on YouTube, right? So having said that, I will adjourn the meeting at 8:14 p.m. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Pleasure.
you.
Thank you all.
Bye. See you next meeting.